Okay, so we're gonna, like we said last time, we're gonna go ahead and do a similar thing in part 3, but we're gonna add another piece of the puzzle. And the piece of the puzzle we're gonna add is called functions. So let's take this, let's copy this folder, and we'll paste another one. Now we're gonna rename this. So it currently says part 3 copy. We'll go erase that, and we'll change this to part 4. We're gonna go in here, and we're gonna rename part 3.cpp. We're gonna rename that to part 4. Okay, and we were going to delete a.out. All right, we'll close this up. And just kidding. Okay, so now we're going to open up part 4. Okay, you can see that's open now. Let's make this bigger. Okay, so we've got this here. Now we're going to also open up terminal again. As you remember, part 4. We're going to go into part 4, and there is no dash. All right, we're in desktop part 4. All right, so now we have this. We got part 4.cpp. Now, if you remember, we had talked about how main is a function. Functions can be called. So we're going to create a new function. The first thing that the function has is what it returns. So we're going to have this new function return an int. And then we're going to have the name of the function. And this function, what it's going to do is it is going to add. It's just going to add. So we're going to call it add. Then inside these parentheses, now main doesn't receive anything. So up to this point, this function looks exactly the same as main. But inside of here, we need to place the two things that it receives. And we can do that by, we need to know what type it's going to receive and the name of what it's going to receive, or the alias. So it's going to receive an int, and we're going to call that int num1. And it's going to receive another int, and it's going to be called num2. Now, in here, num1 and num2 are accessible inside of this add here, but we can't use them here. They don't exist here. But what we can do is we can call the function. So we're going to get rid of this. We're going to keep everything here, but we're going to get rid of this. Okay? So everything's going to be the same up to this point. The user is still going to enter the numbers, right? So we're just changing right here. And so down here we're going to comment. We're going to say the function add as declared. So this right here, this is a declaration. It's also a definition. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll show you how to do this differently. But this is a function definition and a function declaration here. So we're saying there is a function. It is called add. It returns an int, and it requires 2 ints in here. And then we're going to write the code for what it does inside of here. Otherwise, we could do something a little bit different. We could just declare it, and we could just say, okay, well, we're not going to define it here. We're going to define it down below, but we are going to declare it here because the rule for C++ is this. Any function that is called must be declared or defined above the function that called it, because otherwise the compiler doesn't understand that there is a function called add. It will, if we put add down here, it would just believe that add did not exist, and it would throw an error and say we can't compile this because we don't see the function add. So we need to put at least the function definition here. Now, or the function declaration here. Now we don't need to define the function, so we don't need to say what the name of the parameters is. This is the parameter list here. We don't need to say what the name of them is, but we do need to declare how many of them there are and their types. So here we have 2 ints. Now below, we're going to continue to write our function down here. So we'll go int add int add, and then in here we'll say int num1, comma, int num2. Then we need to put our block of code inside of here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, there's a couple ways of doing this. We can say int num3 equals, just like we did up here, num1 plus num2, semicolon. And then we can say return num3, semicolon, right? Or we can say, we can get rid of this and simply return num1 plus num2. Now, what this is going to do, we're going to want to put this in parentheses to force operator. It's called operator precedence. So what we're doing by these parentheses is saying this has to complete before we can return. Now, I'm not quite sure, but there is a possibility that otherwise num1 could be returned before it gets added to num2, and we don't want that. So we're going to leave our function like this. This is the least amount of code here, but we do want to write either down here or up here. We want to write what's called a function comment. So we're going to do this. We're going to make a big comment here, and then we're going to say this function adds the first parameter to the second and returns their values, combined values. Then we'll go over here and we will end the function comment. So this just tells everybody that wants to use this function in the future, hey, this is what the function does. Now, if we later needed to call add again, then we could do that. And I'll show you how to call this function now. So we're just going to say this calls the function that adds num1 and number 2. So in this case, they're called number 1 and number 2. So we're going to say number 3 equals add number 1, comma, number 2, semicolon, just like that. And we can see that this will then set number 3 equal to that. And then we are going to save this. Let's try compiling it now. Part 4, G++, part 4.cpp, as we've done before. Okay, that completed. Now we're going to do ls, and we can see a.out again, and we'll say sudo /a.out. And we'll enter our password, and we'll enter the first number 10, and we'll enter the second number 12, and we can see that 10 plus 12 equals 22, just as it did before. But you'll notice that this may initially seem like more code, right? Because it's different than what we were doing before, and we did have to put this up here, and we did have to put this down here. But the one thing it allows us to do, and this is why we want to definitely always break our ideas, break operations down into smaller functions, is because this here allows this add function to be called again. So let's say that we had another number, okay? So if we got another number from the user, so we did this again, but we said please enter the third number, and we got the third number, then we could call add again on number 3 and number 3 and whatever this other number that the user just entered is. So yeah, we can call this again, which helps us so that this modular function, we don't have to retype out this every single time we need it. We can just type add number 1 and number 2. Now it may still seem like that's just too much code. But if you think about it, if we were doing a lot of things in one single step, it would be easier to just write that code one time and then have it available to call frequently. So what this allows our code to be is it allows our code to be more readable. And that's super helpful in programming. It's a key thing that we definitely want. While we do have these comments, if we had to copy and paste the same code 10 times, it just doesn't make sense to do it that way. That's where this writing of different functions, which is called modularity, comes into play, and modularity is a really important part of programming. In the next section, we're going to work on if statements. So this will allow us to write a control flow so that we can allow our user to make some decisions and allow our program to react to those decisions, which will allow the user to do multiple things. So in the next step, we'll start by allowing the user to pick add or subtract, which are two different things, and our program will do two different things accordingly.